My name is Eleanor Thompson. I'm 68 years old, and what I'm about to tell you happened on a sunny Tuesday afternoon last April. My granddaughter Lily, just 7 years old, was clinging to my legs with tears streaming down her face, begging me not to go. "Please stay, Grandma, please." Meanwhile, through the living room window, I could see my son Robert and his wife Diana hurriedly packing my suitcases into their car. There were 5 neighbors watching from their porches across the street. They saw everything, how my own son couldn't even wait for me to say goodbye to my grandchild before disposing of me. But what Robert and Diana didn't know then was that I had been preparing for this moment for years. After living a full life of sacrifice and dedication to my family, I never expected to be discarded like yesterday's newspaper. I raised 2 children as a widow, worked 2 jobs to put them through college, and came to live with my son's family when they claimed they needed help with childcare. For 3 years, I cooked, cleaned, and cared for my grandchildren while they built their careers. But as I stood there watching my belongings being loaded into a car bound for Golden Sunset Retirement Home, I realized they never saw me as family, just convenient, free help that had outlived its usefulness. The journey that led to that heartbreaking scene began 5 years earlier when Robert called me, his voice filled with that familiar tone that always preceded a request. "Mom, Diana and I are both getting promotions, but the hours are going to be brutal. We need someone to help with Lily and Max, just until they're both in school full-time. You've always said you wanted to spend more time with the grandkids." How could I say no? My small apartment in Cleveland wasn't much, but it was mine. Still, family comes first. That's what I always believed. I remember Thanksgiving dinners at my house when Robert and his sister Charlotte were children, the table overflowing with food I'd spent days preparing. Their father James would carve the turkey with such ceremony, telling stories about his own childhood holidays. "A family stays together," he'd always say. "That's what matters most in this world." After James died from his heart attack at just 49, I kept those traditions alive, working double shifts at the hospital as a nurse to ensure the children never felt the financial strain of losing their father. Mom was always there, Charlotte once told her husband at their wedding reception. She never missed a school play, a baseball game, or a parent-teacher conference, even when she was exhausted from working all night. I didn't do those things for recognition or gratitude. I did them because that's what mothers do. That's what family means. When I moved in with Robert and Diana, I brought very little with me. They said the guest room was small, and besides, most of my furniture wouldn't match their aesthetic. I left behind my cherrywood dining table, the one James and I bought our first year of marriage, along with the china cabinet my mother had given me. I kept only what fit in 3 suitcases and a few boxes, including James's watch, the children's baby books, and the quilt my grandmother had made, passed down through generations. At first, everything seemed fine. Lily, then 4, and Max, just 2, were delighted to have Grandma living with them. I would make them breakfast every morning before Robert and Diana rushed off to their corporate jobs. I'd read to them, take them to the park, prepare their favorite meals. "You're a lifesaver, Eleanor," Diana would say as she breezed in at 7 p.m., just in time to kiss the children goodnight. "We couldn't do this without you." For the first year, I was included in family dinners on the rare occasions both Robert and Diana were home. They would discuss their work achievements while I listened proudly. "My son, the marketing director," I would say, patting Robert's hand. "Your father would have been so proud." Robert would smile, but sometimes I caught something in his expression, a flicker of impatience, perhaps, as if my presence was a reminder of a past he was trying to outgrow. By the second year, things began to change. I noticed Diana would sigh when I offered suggestions about the children's routine. "The parenting books actually recommend against that approach now, Eleanor," she would say, though she spent barely 2 waking hours with the children each day. Robert began coming home later, often after I'd gone to bed. The invitations to join them for dinner grew less frequent. "Grandma, why don't you eat with Mommy and Daddy anymore?" Lily asked one evening as I served her and Max their dinner at the kitchen table. "Well, sweetheart, your parents need time to talk about grown-up things," I explained, though the truth was I hadn't been invited. It was around this time that I began noticing the whispered conversations, the way they would stop talking when I entered a room. Once, I overheard Diana on the phone. "It's just challenging, you know. My mother-in-law has very outdated ideas about child rearing, and she's always there in every room watching everything I do." I was hurt, but I tried to make myself less obtrusive. I took the children to the park more often, spent time in my small bedroom reading when I wasn't needed. I thought perhaps I had overstepped, that Diana felt criticized by my presence. I wanted to make things better. Robert, I said one evening when we found ourselves alone in the kitchen, I was thinking I might look for a small apartment nearby. Give you and Diana more space, but still be close enough to help with the children. He looked startled. Don't be silly, Mom. Where would you go? Besides, it makes no sense financially, and the kids need you here. His response reassured me, but in retrospect, I realized he was just concerned about losing the free childcare. The real shift came when both children started school. Suddenly, my primary purpose in the household had diminished. I still prepared meals, kept the house clean, and cared for the children after school, but I could sense Robert and Diana reassessing my value. We should talk about Mom, I overheard Robert say to Diana late one night, now that the kids are in school all day. For Golden Sunset has openings, Diana replied, her voice low. We toured it when we were looking for your dad, remember? It's actually quite nice. She doesn't have enough for a place like that, Robert said. Her Social Security barely covers basics. Well, we could help a little. Besides, they take Medicare. And honestly, Robert, I need my house back. I need to be able to entertain clients without your mother offering everyone her homemade cookies and telling stories about when you were a bedwetter. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. My own son was discussing disposing of me as if I were an outdated appliance. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about James, about the promises we had made to each other to always care for our children. Would he have expected our children to care for us in return? Had I raised my son to believe family obligations only went one direction? The next morning, I called Charlotte. She lived in Arizona with her husband Tom and their teenage sons. We spoke regularly, but I had never complained about my living situation with Robert. I didn't want to create family discord. Mom, is everything okay? You're calling so early, Charlotte said, concern evident in her voice. I'm fine, dear. I just wanted to hear your voice, I said. Then, trying to sound casual, I was thinking of maybe looking for my own place again. Now that both children are in school, Robert and Diana don't need me quite as much. There was a pause. Mom, are they making you feel unwelcome? Because you could always come stay with us. We have plenty of room, and Tom has been saying for years that you should move closer to us. I felt tears spring to my eyes at her immediate offer. Oh, Charlotte, that's so kind. But Arizona is so far from everything I know, and I'd never see Lily and Max Wickets. You barely see Robert now from what you told me, and the kids could visit during school breaks. Just promise me you'll think about it. I worry about you, Mom. After we hung up, I sat at my small desk in the corner of my bedroom and took out my banking information. My Social Security check was $1,842 per month. My late husband's pension added another $630. I had $42,000 in savings, what remained of the money from selling our house after James died. Not enough to buy a new home in this expensive area, but perhaps enough for a small condo somewhere more affordable or a decent rental. For the next several months, I secretly researched options. I looked at senior living communities in Ohio, near my old neighborhood. I investigated small apartments near Charlotte and Arizona. I even considered a retirement community in Florida, where my sister had lived before she passed. All the while, I continued caring for Robert's family, pretending I hadn't overheard their plans to send me to Golden Sunset. Grandma, will you always live with us? Lily asked one afternoon as I helped her with her homework. Well, sweetheart, nothing is forever. Someday you'll grow up and move into your own home. But you won't, right? You're already grown up. I smiled at her logic. Even grandmas sometimes need their own space, Lily. But I'll always be your grandmother, no matter where I live. She frowned, clearly troubled by the idea. I don't want you to go anywhere. Daddy says old people go to special homes, but I want you to stay in our home. My heart ached at her innocent revelation of conversations that had clearly been happening around her. What else did Daddy say about old people in special homes? That sometimes they get con. She struggled with the word. Confused? I offered. Yes, confused. And that they need nurses and doctors nearby. Are you confused, Grandma? No, sweetie, I'm not confused at all, I said, making a mental note to check my medical records. I suspected Robert and Diana might be building a case that I was no longer competent to live independently. That evening, I placed a call to my old friend Margaret, who had been the office manager at the hospital where I worked for 30 years. Margaret, I need a favor. Could you request a copy of my medical records from Dr. Phillips? I'd like to review them. Of course, Eleanor. Is everything all right? Margaret had always been perceptive. Just being cautious, I replied. And Margaret, could you recommend a good elder law attorney? I think I need to get my affairs in order. 2 weeks later, I sat in the office of Harriet Wilson, attorney at law, specializing in elder rights and estate planning. She was a no-nonsense woman about my age, with silver hair cut in a practical bob and reading glasses perched on her nose. So, Mrs. Thompson, you believe your son and daughter-in-law are planning to place you in a nursing home against your will, she asked after I explained my situation. I don't know if it would be against my will exactly. They haven't discussed it with me directly, but they're certainly making plans without my input. And you've been serving as a full-time unpaid caregiver for their children for the past 3 years? Yes, though the children are in school now. Harriet removed her glasses and fixed me with a direct look. Eleanor, may I speak frankly? Please do. What you described is unfortunately common. Many families take advantage of elderly parents, particularly mothers, expecting unlimited free childcare and household management. Then, when the parent is no longer useful in that capacity, they're discarded. Her blunt assessment made me flinch, but I couldn't deny the accuracy. However, she continued, you have options. First, you have the right to make your own decisions about where you live. They cannot force you into a facility unless you've been declared legally incompetent, which, based on our conversation, you clearly are not. She outlined several possibilities, including asserting my right to stay, demanding payment for past services rendered, and seeking independent housing. I recommend documenting everything, she advised. Keep a record of all care you provide, any discussions about your living situation, any indications of their plans. I left her office feeling both empowered and saddened. Was this what family had come to? Needing legal protection from my own child? That night, I began my documentation in a small notebook. Prepared breakfast for family. 6:30 a.m. drove Lily to soccer practice. 10 a.m. picked up Max from friend's house. 2 p.m. ate dinner. 5 p.m. Robert and Diana home. 7:30 p.m. overheard Diana telling Robert, my mother suggested a new medication that might help with your mom's anxiety. Might make the transition to Golden Sunset easier. I didn't have anxiety, and no doctor had prescribed any medication. They were already crafting a narrative. It was a Tuesday morning in March when I found the Golden Sunset brochure on the kitchen counter. Glossy photos showed smiling seniors in a well-appointed lobby, at craft tables, walking on manicured paths. The brochure was open to a page advertising a spring special for new residents. Transition with ease this season, the headline proclaimed cheerfully. Robert came into the kitchen while I was staring at it. He had the decency to look embarrassed. Mom, I can explain. Were you planning to discuss this with me? Or just present it as a fait accompli? I asked, surprising myself with my calm tone. Robert sighed and sat down at the kitchen island. We were going to talk to you this weekend. Diana's mother is coming to help with the conversation. I see. So I need Diana's mother to explain to me where I should live? I raised you by myself after your father died, put you through college, cared for your children for 3 years, but I need direction from a woman who visits her grandchildren twice a year? Robert flushed. That's not fair, Mom. Joanne is very knowledgeable about senior care options. She helped place her own father a few years ago. Placed him. Like an object. Is that how you see me, Robert? As an object to be placed somewhere convenient? Of course not, he protested. But we need to be practical. This house isn't really set up for aging in place. There are stairs. The bathroom doorways aren't wide enough for mobility aids if you eventually need them. I'm 68, not 98, I interrupted. I have no mobility issues. I still walk 3 miles a day with the neighbors. Right now, yes, but we need to think ahead. And honestly, Mom, Diana feels like she can't fully use the house with you here. She wants to convert your room into a home office. She's been working from the dining room table for years. There it was, the truth. I was inconvenient. I took up space they wanted for other purposes. 3 years of childcare, cooking, and housekeeping, and I was being evicted for a home office. I see, I said quietly. And how were you planning to finance this arrangement? Golden Sunset isn't cheap. Robert looked uncomfortable. Well, you have your Social Security and Dad's pension. And we thought, that is, we hoped you might consider selling the lakeside property to cover the rest. The lakeside property. The only thing of real value I still owned. 1 acre of land on Lake Erie that James had bought 30 years ago, planning to build our retirement home there someday. After his death, I couldn't bear to sell it. The developers had made offers. It was my last tangible connection to the dreams we'd shared. The property that's in my name alone, that I've refused to sell for 20 years. That property? Mom, be reasonable. You're never going to build anything there. It's just sitting empty, costing you property taxes every year. It makes sense to use that asset for your care. I stood up, my hand shaking slightly. I think I need some air. I walked out the back door into the garden I had planted and tended since moving in. The spring bulbs were just beginning to emerge. Daffodils and tulips I would likely not see bloom. I pulled out my phone and called Charlotte. They want to send me to Golden Sunset and sell my lake property to pay for it, I said without preamble. Those ungrateful, Charlotte rarely cursed, but she made an exception now. Mom, I meant what I said. Come live with us. Today. I'll book you a flight right now. It's not that simple, Charlotte. There's the property to consider and my things in storage in Cleveland and... I trailed off, thinking about Lily and Max, the children. I can't just disappear from their lives. Robert forfeited any right to use the grandchildren as leverage when he started making retirement home plans behind your back, Charlotte said firmly. As for the property and your things, we can figure that out. The important thing is getting you out of there before they try something more drastic. What do you mean, more drastic? Charlotte's voice softened. Mom, I hate to say this, but I've heard stories. Adult children convincing doctors their parents need anxiety medication to ease the transition, getting control of finances, even seeking guardianship by claiming cognitive decline. A chill ran through me as I remembered the conversation I had overheard about anxiety medication. Diana's mother suggested medication for anxiety I don't have. Oh, Mom. Charlotte's voice broke. Please, let me help you. I can fly out tomorrow, help you pack, bring you back with me. Let me think, I said. I need a plan, not just a reaction. After hanging up, I called Harriet Wilson. Her secretary put me through immediately. They've made their move, I told her. Golden Sunset, and they want to sell my lake property to pay for it. Are you ready to make a counter move? Harriet asked. I think I need to be, I replied. What do you recommend? Over the next hour, Harriet outlined a strategy. First, securing my financial independence by ensuring Robert couldn't access any of my accounts. Second, getting an independent medical evaluation to document my mental competence. Third, deciding what I actually wanted, to stay and fight or to leave on my own terms. The property is your ace, Harriet said. They clearly want it, and that gives you leverage. But don't let them pressure you into selling it unless that's truly what you want. For the next 2 weeks, I quietly put Harriet's plan into action. I moved my banking to a new institution where Robert had no connections. I visited an independent geriatric specialist who documented my excellent cognitive function and physical health. I consulted with a real estate agent about the current value of my lakeside property, which had appreciated considerably since developers had begun building luxury homes nearby. I also spent time with Lily and Max, trying to prepare them without alarming them. If Grandma ever lived somewhere else, I asked Max, what would you want to do when you visited me? Have cookies, the 5-year-old responded promptly, and go to a swimming pool. I'd want to still have our reading time, Lily said thoughtfully. And maybe we could write letters to each other? I like getting mail. Their resilience both comforted and saddened me. Children adapt, I knew. They would miss me, but they would adjust to whatever new normal emerged. The evening before Diana's mother was scheduled to arrive for the family discussion, I sat down at the dining room table with Robert and Diana after the children were in bed. I'd like to discuss my living arrangements before Joanne arrives tomorrow, I said calmly. Diana looked surprised. We were going to wait. I know about Golden Sunset, I interrupted. I've known for some time about your plans. But before we discuss that, I want to review the past 3 years. I opened a folder I had brought with me. For the past 3 years, I have provided approximately 60 hours per week of childcare, meal preparation, housekeeping, and household management. At current market rates, that service would cost approximately $52,000 per year. I slid a paper with my calculations across the table. Robert and Diana exchanged alarmed looks. Additionally, I've contributed $400 monthly toward household expenses totaling $14,400. Another paper joined the first. I've maintained my own medical insurance and personal expenses. Mom, what is this about? Robert asked, his voice strained. This is about clarifying my contributions to this household before decisions are made about my future. If you'd hired a full-time nanny, housekeeper, and cook, you would have paid well over $150,000 for the services I've provided. Instead, you received those services in exchange for a small bedroom and the privilege of living with my family. Diana's face had turned an interesting shade of red. Are you billing us? For being a grandmother? No, Diana. I'm establishing the value of my contributions so we can have an honest conversation about reciprocity and family obligation. You've benefited substantially from my presence. Now that my services are no longer required, you wish to place me in a facility and claim my property to pay for it. That's not fair, Robert protested. We're thinking about your well-being. Golden Sunset has activities, social opportunities, medical care. Golden Sunset is a perfectly adequate facility for seniors who need or want that environment. I don't. I'm healthy, active, and perfectly capable of independent living. But where would you go? Diana asked, genuine confusion in her voice, as if she couldn't imagine I might have options beyond what they had chosen for me. I have several options, I replied. I could purchase a condominium in Cleveland near my old neighborhood. I could move to Arizona to be near Charlotte. I could even, I pause for effect, build the lakeside home that James and I always planned. But that would cost, Robert began. Yes, it would. Fortunately, I have consulted with both financial and legal advisors. The property has appreciated considerably. With my savings and a small mortgage, building is entirely feasible. Diana's eyes narrowed. You've been planning this. I've been responding to your plans, which you chose not to include me in. I closed my folder. I will not be attending the meeting with Joanne tomorrow. Instead, I'll be meeting with the builder to discuss options for my lakeside property. I plan to remain here for 1 more month, during which time I'll help the children adjust to my departure. After that, I'll be staying with Charlotte while construction begins. The shock on their faces might have been satisfying under different circumstances. Instead, it just made me sad. How had my son become someone who would dispose of his mother so callously? You can't just decide this unilaterally, Robert sputtered. Why not? You did. I stood up. I've raised my children, Robert. I've helped raise your children. At 68, I'm finally going to live for myself in the home by the lake that your father and I dreamed about. I've earned that much. As I turned to leave, Diana called after me, "What about the children? Have you thought about how this will affect them?" I paused at the doorway. I've thought about nothing else. They'll be welcome to visit me as often as you'll allow. I hope you'll allow it frequently. That night, I couldn't sleep. Had I been too harsh? Was I overreacting? But then I remembered the casual way they had discussed medicating me, the entitled assumption that my property should fund their preferred solution. No, I wasn't overreacting. I was finally standing up for myself. The next morning, Joanne arrived just as I was leaving from my appointment with the builder. She was a carefully preserved woman in her 70s, dressed expensively and radiating an air of authority. "You must be Eleanor," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I heard so much about you." "All good, I hope," I replied with a polite smile, shaking her hand briefly. "Diana tells me we're having an important family discussion today." "You certainly are," I agreed. "But I won't be participating. I've already made my decisions." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "Decisions? Without consulting with the family?" Yes, much like the family made decisions about my future without consulting me. I picked up my purse. If you'll excuse me, I have an appointment with an architect. I left her standing in the foyer, mouth slightly agape. As I backed my car out of the driveway, I saw Robert hurrying out to greet his mother-in-law, gesturing animatedly, no doubt explaining that the troublesome old woman wasn't following the script. The meeting with the architect exceeded my expectations. Brian Feldman was a thoughtful man in his 50s who specialized in accessible design. Not just for current needs, he explained, but anticipating how your needs might change over time. Wider doorways, a first-floor main bedroom suite, lever handles instead of knobs. Small details that make aging in place more comfortable. We discussed a modest but beautiful lakeside home with large windows to capture the view, a wraparound porch for enjoying summer evenings, and guest rooms for when family visited, including a special room for my grandchildren, I specified, with bunk beds and a reading nook. For the first time in years, I felt genuine excitement about the future. This was what James and I had planned, a peaceful retirement by the water, a place where family could gather on our terms. When I returned to Robert's house that afternoon, the atmosphere was frigid. Diana barely acknowledged my greeting, disappearing upstairs immediately. Robert sat stiffly in the living room, Joanne beside him on the sofa. "Mom, we need to talk," he began. "I agree," I said, taking a seat across from them. "I've had a productive meeting with the architect. Would you like to see the preliminary sketches for my new home?" "This is exactly what concerns us," Joanne interjected, making impulsive, major decisions without proper consideration. "There's nothing impulsive about it," I countered. "James and I bought that property 30 years ago specifically to build our retirement home. I'm simply fulfilling our original plan after a 20-year delay." "Mom," Robert said, his voice taking on a tone I recognized from childhood, the one he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "You can't possibly manage building a house at your age. The stress, the decisions, the potential for contractors to take advantage. I managed to raise 2 children alone after your father died," I reminded him. "I worked full-time, maintained our home, put you both through college, and cared for my own parents in their final years. I think I can handle building a house with professional assistance." "But the cost," he persisted. "You'll deplete your savings. What happens if you need care later? The house will have equity, and I'll still have my monthly income from Social Security and your father's pension. Besides," I added, "the money I've saved by providing free childcare and housekeeping for your family has actually allowed me to increase my savings over the past 3 years." Joanne cleared her throat. "Eleanor, I understand you're feeling displaced. But Golden Sunset offers a community of peers, activity, security." "Thank you, Joanne, but I've made my decision. I'm building my lakeside home." I turned to Robert. "I'd like you and the children to be part of this process. They could help choose colors for their bedroom, perhaps. It would make the transition easier for them." Robert looked troubled. "Mom, we need more time to discuss this. We're concerned about your decision-making recently. Diana mentioned you seemed forgetful, anxious, and there it was, the beginning of the narrative they were constructing." I was so glad I had taken precautions. "That's interesting," I said calmly. "I visited Dr. Carson last week for my annual checkup. He noted my excellent cognitive function and physical health in his report." I reached into my purse and handed Robert a sealed envelope. "He suggested I keep a copy of my medical records on hand, given recent research about age discrimination in healthcare. How thoughtful of him." Robert took the envelope reluctantly. Joanne's expression had turned calculating. "You seem to have thought of everything," she said, her tone suggesting this was not a compliment. "I've had to," I replied simply. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I promised Lily I'd help with her science project before dinner." The next few weeks were tense. Diana spoke to me only when absolutely necessary. Robert alternated between stilted attempts at normal conversation and bringing up concerns about my plans. I maintained my routine with the children, trying to shield them from the adult conflict while gently preparing them for changes to come. "Grandma's going to build a house by a lake," I told them one afternoon, "with a special bedroom just for you to stay in when you visit." "Can we go swimming in the lake?" Max asked excitedly. "When it's warm enough, yes. And we can look for pretty stones along the shore. and watch for herons and eagles. How far away is it? Lily asked, the more practical of the two. About an hour's drive from here. Not too far. She nodded seriously. That's good, because I want to visit a lot. My heart squeezed. I want that too, sweetheart. One evening, after the children were in bed, Diana confronted me in the kitchen. Robert may be too soft to say this, but I'm not. You're being selfish. I looked up from the dish I was drying. How so? Upsetting the children, dividing the family, spending money that should be preserved for your care, all to prove a point. What point would that be, Diana? That you're still independent. That you don't need us? That you can do whatever you want. She crossed her arms. Meanwhile, the children are confused and upset. Robert is stressed, and you're about to waste your savings on a house you'll probably only live in for a few years. I set the dish down carefully. I understand you see it that way. From my perspective, I'm creating a home where I can live comfortably and welcome my family on visits. I'm securing my independence rather than becoming an institution resident while I'm still healthy and active. And I'm showing my grandchildren that growing older doesn't mean surrendering your dreams or your dignity. Diana's expression didn't soften. The children have been asking if they can sleep over at your new house. That's not going to work for our family schedule. And there it was, the real issue. Control. Diana feared losing control over when and how I saw the children. Perhaps she even worried they might prefer time with me in my lakeside home to time in their own heavily scheduled lives. That's for you and Robert to decide, I said evenly. I'll always welcome them, but I understand you set the boundaries as their parents. She seemed taken aback by my reasonableness. Well, good, as long as that's clear. As my departure date approached, the children became increasingly clingy. Lily especially seemed to sense the adult tensions beneath the surface. Why can't you just keep living here and build your lake house too? She asked one evening as I tucked her in. Sometimes adults need their own space, I explained. Just like you'll want your own room when you get older, not sharing with Max forever. But I'll still be in the same house with Mom and Dad, she persisted. And I'll still be your grandma, no matter where I live, I assured her. Some things don't change, even when addresses do. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Daddy said you're being stubborn. Stubborn? I corrected gently. Yeah, stubborn. And that you don't really need your own house. I chose my words carefully. Your daddy and I see things differently right now, but we both love you very much, and that won't change. Promise you won't forget about us when you live in your lake house? Oh, Lily, I hugged her tight. I could never, ever forget about you. You and Max will always be my precious grandchildren, no matter where any of us live. The final confrontation came the day before Charlotte was due to arrive. I was in my room, packing the last of my belongings, when Robert appeared in the doorway. Mom, we need to talk. Diana's parents are here. I looked up in surprise. Both of them? I thought Roger was in Florida. He flew in this morning. They want to speak with you. A family intervention, then. I set down the sweater I was folding. Very well. In the living room, Joanne and Roger sat side by side on the sofa, with Diana in an armchair. The tableau had an undeniable air of formality, like a tribunal. I chose a seat opposite them, with Robert hovering uncertainly between the groups. Eleanor, Roger began, Joanne has filled me in on the situation. We're concerned about your recent decisions. Thank you for your concern, I replied calmly. But my decisions aren't recent. James and I plan to build on our lakeside property for 30 years. I'm finally making it happen. At significant financial risk, Roger continued, I've taken the liberty of researching building costs in that area. You're looking at a minimum of $300,000 for even a modest home, plus ongoing maintenance, property taxes. I'm aware of the costs, I interrupted. I've consulted with financial advisors, a builder, and an attorney. The property itself is now worth approximately $220,000. With my savings of $42,000 and a small mortgage, the project is entirely feasible. Roger frowned. A mortgage? At your age? A 15-year fixed-rate mortgage, yes. Given current interest rates and my excellent credit, it's a sound financial decision. And if something happens to you before it's paid off? Roger pressed. What then? The bank takes the house, your equity disappears, and all that money is wasted. I've thought of that, I replied. The mortgage will include a term life insurance policy sufficient to pay it off in full if I die before it's satisfied. The house would then pass to my children, unencumbered. I could see Roger was frustrated by my thoroughness. He had expected to find holes in my plan that he could exploit to convince me, and more importantly, Robert, that I was being financially irresponsible. Joanne took over. Eleanor, setting aside the financial considerations, we're concerned about your isolation. Living alone by the lake, away from family and immediate medical assistance, it's not safe for someone your age. I'll be 15 minutes from the nearest hospital, I countered. In a community with neighbors, with a security system and medical alert service, with regular visits from family, I hope. I glanced at Robert. And I'll have something equally important, independence and dignity. Diana made a sound of exasperation. This is exactly what I mean, Robert. She's being completely unreasonable. We offer her a nice retirement community with activities and care, and she acts like we're abandoning her. You are abandoning me, I said quietly. Just not physically. You're abandoning the idea that I might know what's best for myself. You're abandoning your responsibility to treat me with respect. You're abandoning the basic courtesy of including me in decisions about my own life. Mom, Robert began, his tone placating, we're trying to take care of you. No, I said firmly. You're trying to solve a problem. I've become inconvenient, and Golden Sunset is your solution. My solution is different. What about the children? Diana demanded. Have you thought about how confused they'll be? First you live with us, then suddenly you're gone, living in some house by the lake. Children adapt to change when it's presented honestly and lovingly, I said. And they'll understand a lot more than you think. Lily already understands that you want me gone. Diana's eyes widened. What did you tell her? I didn't have to tell her anything. She overheard you and Robert discussing special homes for old people who get confused. Children absorb more than adults realize. An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Roger cleared his throat. Well, regardless of how we got here, the practical reality is that Eleanor has made her decision. The question is how we move forward as a family. I felt a surge of unexpected appreciation for Roger's pragmatism. Thank you, Roger. That's exactly right. I've made my decision, and I'd like to keep my relationship with my family intact, especially my grandchildren. Robert looked troubled. Mom, I don't want us to be at odds, but I'm worried about you being all alone in a new house, with construction stress and all the responsibilities of homeownership. I understand your concern, I said, softening my tone. But Robert, I was a homeowner for 40 years before I moved in here. I managed our family home, handled repairs, paid the mortgage, all while working full-time and raising you and Charlotte alone after your father died. Why would you think I can't handle it now? He had no good answer for that. I could see him struggling to reconcile the capable mother he knew with the frail elderly person he'd decided I must be. Here's what I propose, I continued. I'll move forward with building my lakeside home. Charlotte will arrive tomorrow to help me relocate temporarily to Arizona while construction proceeds. In the meantime, I'd like to arrange regular video calls with Lily and Max, and perhaps monthly visits. Either they come to Arizona, or I return here until the house is ready. Then I hope they can be among my first guests. That seems reasonable, Robert admitted reluctantly. Diana looked less convinced, but didn't argue further. Joanne and Roger exchanged glances that suggested they were reevaluating their assessment of me. Well then, I said, rising from my seat. I should finish packing. Charlotte's flight arrives at noon tomorrow. As I turned to leave, Lily appeared in the doorway, her small face solemn. Grandma, are you really leaving tomorrow? 5 adults froze, staring at the child none of us had realized was listening. I recovered first, going to kneel in front of her. Yes, sweetheart. Remember I told you I'm going to build that special house by the lake? Aunt Charlotte is coming to help me. Her lower lip trembled. But I don't want you to go. I know, darling. I'll miss you terribly. But we'll talk on the computer, and you can come visit me, and before you know it, my new house will be ready with your very own special room. With the bunk beds? She asked, a hint of hope in her watery eyes. Absolutely. And a window seat for reading, just like you wanted. Behind me, I heard Diana whisper something to Robert, her tone urgent but too low to make out the words. Robert cleared his throat. Lily, honey, it's past your bedtime. Say goodnight to Grandma and I'll tuck you in. Can Grandma tuck me in tonight? Since she's leaving? Lily pleaded. Diana started to object, but Robert surprised me by saying, Of course she can. Go brush your teeth and Grandma will be right there. As Lily scampered off, I turned to Robert with genuine gratitude. Thank you. He nodded, something sad and complicated in his expression. She's going to miss you. And I'll miss her, and Max more than I can say, but this doesn't have to be a severing. It can be a new chapter, with different but still meaningful connections. After tucking Lily in with extra stories and cuddles, I returned to my room to finish packing. The atmosphere in the house had shifted subtly. There was still tension, still unresolved feelings, but the outright opposition had faded to a reluctant acceptance. Late at night, I slept little, thinking about the journey ahead. Building a new home. Starting over in my late 60s. Navigating a changed relationship with Robert's family while trying to maintain my bond with my grandchildren. It was daunting, but also invigorating. For the first time in years, I was charting my own course. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Max was clingy at breakfast, wanting to sit in my lap, though he had recently declared himself too big for such things. Lily was quieter than usual, watching my every move as if memorizing me. Robert was polite but subdued, helping carry my bags to the front door. Diana maintained a cool distance, but I noticed she had packed a container of homemade cookies, my recipe, for me to take on the journey. A small olive branch, perhaps. At 11 a.m., with my bags packed and waiting by the door, I sat with Lily and Max in the living room for one last story before leaving for the airport. We were halfway through the Velveteen Rabbit, Lily's choice, when the doorbell rang. That must be my taxi, I said, marking our place in the book. Robert went to answer the door, but returned looking confused. Mom, there's a man named Brian Feldman here to see you. Says he's your architect? I was equally puzzled. Brian? We don't have an appointment today. Brian appeared behind Robert, his expression apologetic. I'm so sorry to drop in unannounced, Mrs. Thompson. I had a cancellation and was in the neighborhood. I've completed the preliminary sketches for your lakeside home and thought you might want to see them before you leave for Arizona. Oh, yes, of course, I said, genuinely pleased. Please come in. Brian entered with a large portfolio, which he set on the coffee table. As he opened it, Lily and Max crowded close, their curiosity temporarily overriding their sadness. Now, Mrs. Thompson, based on our discussions, I've designed a single-level home that maximizes the lake view while providing all the accessibility features we talked about, Brian began, spreading out detailed architecture drawings. The home he had designed was beautiful, simple but elegant, with large windows facing the lake, a wraparound porch, an open floor plan, and thoughtful details that would make it comfortable for years to come. This is the main living area, Brian explained, pointing. And here's the kitchen with the island you wanted. This section. Here's the master suite, bedroom, bathroom, and a small sitting area with lake views. It's lovely, I said sincerely. And this, he continued, turning to a new page, is the children's wing. 2 bedrooms, one with the bunk beds we discussed, and one that could serve as a playroom or additional bedroom as needed. They share this bathroom here. Lily's eyes widened. That's my room? With the bunk beds? Brian smiled at her. Your grandmother was very specific about what you would like. See this window seat? It's for reading, with storage underneath for books. Lily looked at me with wonder. You remembered. Of course I did, sweetheart. Max was bouncing with excitement. Where's my room? Brian showed him the second bedroom in the children's wing. This one could be yours. We thought maybe a space theme? Stars on the ceiling, planets on the walls. Yes, Mook shouted. I love planets. Robert had been silently studying the plans. Now he spoke, his voice carefully neutral. This is quite a house, Mom. More substantial than I expected. It's not extravagant, I clarified. Just thoughtfully designed for both current needs and future possibilities. Diana had drifted into the room, drawn by the children's excitement. She stood behind the sofa, looking over our shoulders at the plans. You have room for all of us to visit at once, she observed, noting the guest rooms. That's the idea, I said. A place where family can gather. For holidays, summer vacations, weekend visits, whenever you'd like. Brian continued his presentation, showing exterior elevations, landscaping plans, and even 3D renderings that made the home seem real and immediate. The children were captivated, asking questions and making suggestions. Even Robert seemed drawn in, asking practical questions about construction methods and materials. As Brian was packing up his portfolio, preparing to leave, Lily tugged at my sleeve. Grandma, she whispered, though everyone could hear, I'm still sad you're leaving, but I'm happy about your new house. Can we help you build it? Daddy lets us help with projects sometimes. Before I could answer, Robert surprised me again. Maybe we could drive up on weekends when the framing starts, he suggested. The kids would love to see a house being built. I'd like that very much, I said, fighting back sudden tears. After Brian left, with promises to email the digital files of his drawings, the mood in the house had subtly shifted again. The architectural plans had transformed my selfish decision into something concrete and real, not a rejection of family, but the creation of a new family gathering place. As we prepared to leave for the airport to meet Charlotte, Lily clung to me at the front door. I don't want you to go, she repeated, tears streaming down her face. I knelt to her level, brushing the hair from her eyes. I know, my darling. I'll miss you terribly. But remember, this isn't goodbye forever. It's just goodbye for now. And soon you'll come visit me in my lake house with your special room waiting just for you. Promise? I promise. Robert carried my bags to the waiting taxi. As the driver loaded them into the trunk, Robert turned to me awkwardly. Mom, He stopped, struggling for words. I want you to be happy. I hope you know that. I do know that, I said softly. You just forgot for a while that I might know what would make me happy better than you do. He nodded, looking chastened. The house plans, they're really nice. You're going to love living there. I think I will, and I hope you'll all be frequent visitors. We will, he promised. Then unexpectedly, he hugged me tight. I'm sorry, Mom. I just got scared thinking about you getting older, being alone. I wanted you safe. I know, I whispered back. But there's more to life than safety. There's joy and purpose and independence, even at my age, especially at my age. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back to see my family standing in the doorway, Robert with his arm around Diana, Max waving enthusiastically, and Lily with her face pressed against the glass, one small hand outstretched as if trying to keep hold of me. It wasn't the departure I had anticipated when I'd overheard their plans for Golden Sunset. There was sadness, yes, but also a new understanding, the first fragile threads of respect rewoven into our relationship. At the airport, Charlotte was waiting, her familiar face breaking into a wide smile as she spotted me. Mom! She hurried forward to embrace me. How did it go this morning? Any last-minute drama? Actually, I said, it went better than expected. Wait until I tell you about the architect's visit. As we walked to the boarding gate, I filled Charlotte in on the morning's events. She listened, shaking her head in amazement. So the house plans turned everything around? Just like that? Not everything, I cautioned. There's still work to be done on our relationship. But seeing the house made it real. For them, especially for the children, it wasn't just Grandma leaving. It was Grandma building something new that included them. On the plane, settled beside Charlotte for the flight to Arizona, I found myself thinking about the journey ahead. Not just the physical journey to a new home, but the emotional journey of redefining my role in my family. Not as a live-in grandmother and housekeeper, but as an independent woman with a home of her own, where family would be welcomed on mutual terms of respect and love. 3 months later, I stood on the cleared land by Lake Erie watching as construction crews poured the foundation for my new home. Charlotte had flown in for the occasion, and to my surprise, Robert had driven up with Diana and the children. The kids wore miniature hard hats provided by the construction foreman and were beside themselves with excitement. "Look, Grandma," Max shouted, pointing to the concrete mixer. "It's like a giant cake mixer." Lily was more interested in precisely where her room would be. "Will I be able to see the lake from my window?" she asked for perhaps the 10th time. "Yes, sweetheart," I assured her. "From your reading nook, you'll have a perfect view of the water." Diana, who had been quiet for most of the visit, suddenly appeared beside me. "It's beautiful here," she said, gesturing to the expanse of shimmering blue water. "Peaceful." "Yes," I agreed. James had good taste. He always said this was where we'd spend our golden years. She nodded, seeming thoughtful. "The children talk about you every day, you know. They can't wait for the house to be finished." "I miss them terribly," I admitted. "The video calls help, but it's not the same. We were thinking." Diana hesitated, then continued. "Maybe they could stay with you for a week this summer? Once the house is livable? Robert and I have a conference in Chicago, and rather than hire a sitter," I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the June sunshine. "I'd love that. More than anything." Robert joined us, slipping an arm around Diana's waist. "What are you two conspiring about?" "Summer plans," Diana said. "A week at Grandma's new lake house for the kids while we're at the conference." Robert looked surprised but pleased. That sounds perfect, actually." As we stood together watching the construction crew at work, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From overhearing plans to send me to Golden Sunset to standing on the foundation of my dream home with my family beside me, it had been a path of pain, confrontation, and ultimately growth. The house would be completed by fall, the builder promised. In time for Thanksgiving dinner on my new dining table, with places set for Robert, Diana, the children, Charlotte, and her family. A new tradition in a new home, built on the stronger foundation of mutual respect that we were still learning to navigate. Later that evening, after Robert and his family had left for home, Charlotte and I sat on folding chairs overlooking the lake, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. "You know," Charlotte said, "when you called me that day about Golden Sunset, I never imagined we'd end up here." And neither did I admitted. I was just trying to avoid being placed somewhere against my will. And now look at you, building your dream house, redefining your relationship with Robert and Diana, showing those grandkids what independence looks like. I smiled, watching a heron glide low over the water's surface. It's not what I expected at this stage of life. But then again, maybe that's the point. We're never too old for new beginnings. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I thought about Lily's words that terrible day. My granddaughter begged me to stay while her parents packed my bags outside. What had begun as a painful rejection had transformed into an opportunity to assert my independence, to create something beautiful, and to show my family that love and respect must go hand in hand. My new home would be ready by autumn. Not Golden Sunset Retirement Community, with its prescribed activities and medical supervision, but a home of my own choosing, on land that held 30 years of dreams. A place where my grandchildren would have their own rooms, where family gatherings would create new memories, and where I would live in dignity, on my own terms, for however many years remained to me. It wasn't the ending Robert and Diana had planned for me. It was the beginning I had planned for myself. And as the first stars appeared above the darkening lake, I knew with quiet certainty that James would have approved. "Did you like my story?" I asked, looking out at you, my audience. Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed this life story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.